Doesn't seem to. Let me have a look on the YouTube page. Let's have a quick look. I often start things off around 10 past anyway, because obviously with schools being back and whatnot, like to give everybody a chance to get back home and things. Oh no, it's live. We are live. Look at that. Except we're under, it's called Computational Virology. Not, if that's the title of the video. Alright, thanks Andy. Yeah, so I'll hang around only until about 10 past. Hello. How are you? Good? Have you had a good week so far? Good. Good. So things should just be starting to go live now. So feel free to. I'll do the usual thing of I'll stream on Discord and on YouTube and stuff as well, so we can, just in case one doesn't work properly. Let me get it up. There we go. There we are. So I was just saying, what I'll do the usual, wait until around 10 past 4 to start, just in case people are running a little bit late, and then we'll start just after that then. Okay. Oh, have I? Take it. Yeah, I thought for a second I thought I had it open on my screen, and I was like, I don't think I've got that open, but I see you're flicking through the different tabs and things. There's a lot of. It's very colourful. Yeah, it's a bit. It can be funny sometimes. YouTube link should hopefully go away, and there's also a Twitch link as well that's just gone up in the chat. So you have a broad choice of different screens. I can actually hear myself through your speakers. Yeah, it's very odd, isn't it? It's like that recursive screen on Collaborate, isn't it? It's very strange. It's very strange. So OBS does a similar thing as well sometimes. It's very odd. So for those of you who have already joined, welcome. Just saying, I'll do the usual sort of start things off at around 10 past 4 once everybody's had a chance to get settled and joined into the session and things like that. So what we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be starting to add a little bit of JavaScript to our programs. Very kind of basic JavaScript. As well, so just very kind of basic basic introduction to it really, but that's what we'll be doing today. So as I said, we'll wait until around 10 past 4 before we get started, but so until then spend some time just getting your websites loaded up and your documents that you've been working on from last week. go. So that's all set up. Have you still been taking the dog for a walk and things, Andy? Yeah. Did you? I can imagine. I suppose you're a bit limited now, though, on where you can go and stuff, or is there still quite a large area that you can take in? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not too bad. Yes. Have you got some echo? All right. Okay. Well, what we'll do as soon as as soon as we start things off, we'll do the usual thing of we'll all mute our mics unless we're speaking, and then hopefully that'll fix it. We'll start in about a minute or so. Okay. Yes. It's because I'm living in a cave. Yeah, I've heard as well, Andy, that some of the some areas are kind of like half in, half out as well, aren't they? From friends of mine living up in Redrow, and they're not inside of it, but like some of their neighbours are. It's very odd. Exactly. Okay, so we're coming up to 10 past now, so we'll get started on things. So welcome back everybody to the TechnoClub. So today, what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to be doing a little bit of JavaScript, and we're going to just be covering some few kind of basic principles that apply when it comes to implementing some JavaScript on our websites. So I've got Andy with me this week, who's going to be lending us a hand in case any of you are stuck or if any of you have any problems. So the two of us should be on hand to help you out if you are stuck. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a basic introduction to JavaScript. That's going to be kind of the main theme of today's session. And then, as usual, we'll start off with a bit of a recap on last week to see if any of you remember some of the concepts that we talked about last week. And then we will start applying some JavaScript to our websites, and we'll also start adding some more content to our websites as well. What I'll do, as we're talking through each one, I've got two separate pieces of JavaScript that I'm going to be applying to the websites today. Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. Remember, that's all right. It'll be on YouTube as well, remember, if you want to catch up, okay? All right, see you later. Bye. So as I was saying, for those of you who are still who are watching on YouTube and things like that, what we'll do today is we'll start off with a recap, and then I'll be posting some for those of you who are maybe slightly more familiar with JavaScript. I'll be posting the links to the two websites that I've used to kind of get some ideas of what we can include on our websites. I will post those in the Discord, so I'm going to be talking through them sort of step by step, so that we can learn sort of about the structure of a JavaScript document and things like that. However, if you wanted to go maybe a little bit more ahead, so that you can work on other parts of your website as well, I'll post the links to the websites that I've used in the Discord, so that you can kind of go off ahead and try and program things yourself if you want to. So remember, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the Discord or come onto the voice channel, and we will do our best to answer. In addition, just before we get started on the actual main body of the content for today, I just wanted to remind everybody of the upcoming changes that will be happening soon to the TechnoClubs. So from the beginning of November, so from the 2nd of November onwards, there will be some changes to the way that the coding clubs are delivered. So we're of course going to be shifting to having the option of you joining one of 3 separate sessions. So there'll be one with Jack, one with me, and one with Cardiff University, and they will each run on different days of the week. So my session, for example, will be on a Friday, Jack's will be on a Monday, and Cardiff's will be on a Wednesday, and they will run, I believe everybody's sessions are the same time currently, but if there are any changes I will let you know. But from my understanding, we're all running our sessions between 4:30 and 6:30, so that should hopefully give everybody a bit more time to get home from school and get settled down before we start the clubs. And in addition to that, we're also going to be having 2 what we're calling Techno Live sessions every week. So there'll be one on a Tuesday and one on a Thursday. So the one on the Tuesday is with me, the one on the Thursday is with Jack, and these will be different topics every week, for us to kind of work through different things. And the Techno Clubs will be continuing essentially what you've been doing with me over the last few weeks, which is we build on a project week by week. So you don't, of course, need to be in every single one of the Techno Clubs. Normally, you could just choose the one of them. And with the Techno Live sessions, you can join those as well if you want to, or you could just do the Techno Clubs, or you could just do Techno Live. So the choice is going to ultimately be yours in terms of what you would like to do. We will be posting more information about that soon, and in terms of how you can sign up and all that sort of thing. So that will come very soon. But for the time being, I just wanted to let you all know what sort of remind you that this style of Techno Club will be going only until the end of October, and then we'll be changing day and we'll be taking a slightly different approach. So wanted to let you all know about that again before we get started today. So we'll start today off with a bit of a recap on last week. And as usual, I'll go through a series of questions. So again, if you're not sure of the answers, to the questions. Don't worry, because I'll go through them. But my first question is, what is a media query? So does anybody know what a media query is, or just a basic description? Because I know we only looked at basic examples of them last week. But if anybody can remember what a media query is, feel free to post it in the chat. Okay, so no responses so far. So a media query is essentially it can be thought of as a CSS feature. Oops, sorry if the screen went blank there. Hopefully it's come back now. It's a CSS feature that allows us to have our website. It allows us to have our website content respond to different things. So if you think about screen sizes and that sort of thing, so if we're looking at websites that are on mobile phones, or if you think about when you're on a normal website and you shrink down the window size, sometimes things will look as if they're moving around or repositioning themselves on the screen, and that sort of thing can be done using a media query. So that's some examples of that's what a media query, one thing that you can do with a media query at least. So the second question is, does anybody remember, I mean it's sort of in the name, but does anybody remember what mobile first design means? So we kind of touched upon this last week. It kind of ties into why we use media queries on websites. Again, there are lots of different reasons why we would use a media query, but that is just, that was just one of them from last week. But does anybody know what mobile first design means? No? Okay. Well, mobile first design is the idea of designing a website to work on a mobile, or I guess a tablet, before you would design it to work on a PC. So instead of us having a website that's kind of built to work on a computer, a lot of developers might decide to have their websites built to work on a phone before they work on a computer, because a lot of people now browse websites on their mobile phones before they would even look at it on a computer. If you think about it, often people will send each other texts or messages over Facebook or WhatsApp or even Discord, and sometimes, or a lot of the time, you might be browsing on your tablet or your mobile phone. So the first place that you would open that website would be on your mobile phone or on your tablet. So for that reason, a lot of web developers like to design their websites to work on a smaller screen before it works on a bigger screen, because it's much easier to design something to work on a bigger screen if you can get it to work on a smaller screen as well, instead of the opposite way around. So that's one thing to kind of bear in mind as well when you're working on your websites. And the final example, which is more of a programming question really, because it applies to a lot of different things, but what is a variable? Does anybody know what a variable is? Okay, no responses so far. So a variable can be thought of as kind of being like a storage container, or it can be a slot in memory for a piece of data. And this piece of data can change. Okay, so within our computer programs, okay, and this this is seen in pretty much every programming language that's out there. There are variables. Okay, so even in Scratch, even in GameFruit, we have variables, and a variable can be kind of like a storage container. So we give it a name, and in that we would store some data, okay, or a particular value or something like that. So if you think about at home, you might have a box, and for an example, let's just say, I don't know, you were storing your PlayStation games in that box, and you call that box, you write a label on that box and you call it PlayStation games, and inside of that box you've just got a series of PlayStation games, just loads and loads of different PlayStation games. Well, a variable is kind of similar in the concept. So you have a storage space within your computer's memory that will hold a particular value, and that's what a variable is. And we'll be looking at variables a little bit today as we're working through applying some JavaScript to our websites. Okay, so we're going to be doing some of that as we work our way through today's program. So we'll be going into our websites in a little while, and we'll be adding in some JavaScript. But the first thing that we need to bear in mind is that we obviously need a way of linking our JavaScript to our HTML. Okay, so a lot of you might remember that for those of you who are editing files locally, because this only applies if you are editing your files locally, so if you're editing them in something like Visual Studio Code, or if you are editing them using something relatively simple like Notepad, you need to remember that you would need to create a new document now for your JavaScript. You'll need to save it with a .js file extension, and what you will need to do is you will need to put in your HTML what's known as a script tag. So in the head of your HTML document, okay, so the head is one place that you can put it. You can place a script tag, and what that script tag will do is it will link your JavaScript document to your HTML, so that way you are able to actually include it within your website. So for an example, I'll just put an example in chat for you now. So remember, if you're saving everything within the same folder, okay, within the same directory, then you would only need to state that the source is the name of your file. So you could say, let's for an example say that the file was called myjavascript.js. Okay, you would need to include something similar to this inside of your head tag, okay, on your main HTML. So remember, if you are separating out your script, so if your HTML is in a folder called HTML, your CSS is inside of one called CSS, and your JavaScript is inside of one called JavaScript, then you would need to put the file path as part of the source of where you're getting your JavaScript from, okay, so that it all links up. Now, there is sometimes a little bit of debate about where should you put the JavaScript script tag, because some people prefer to put it in the head of the document, some people prefer to put it in the sort of towards the end of your HTML, but there are luckily some attributes that you can pass to your script tag which could potentially sort of prevent this kind of thing from any sort of problems from occurring. So this is actually a diagram which which was in one of my lecture slides from last year. So from my lecturer of the module, who was fantastic. And this is a diagram which he had in one of his lecture slides, which kind of talks about different things that you can put into. I know it looks a bit confusing, but I'll kind of talk through it quickly. These are different things that you can include, so defer and async are attributes that you can include in your script tag to help sort of prevent any problems from occurring when you are trying to load up a web page that also contains some JavaScript. Okay, the idea behind it is that it prevents the JavaScript from loading, let's say, before your page is fully loaded, or it can also prevent the JavaScript from trying to run before your page has it will also prevent the JavaScript from running too late after the page has loaded. So different things can sort of happen, and I won't go into too much detail about this diagram because it's a bit more kind of advanced. However, what we can sort of focus on is this idea here of a defer, of kind of like this defer tag. So this defer attribute here, it actually can allow your JavaScript script to load on your page, but then it will wait, or it will prevent the script from executing until your page has completely kind of loaded up and things like that. So that's what this sort of middle diagram here is kind of demonstrating, is that it will fetch your JavaScript script, and then it will wait until such a time where it will then execute the script once the page has kind of completely loaded. Okay. Now, again, this is something that you might not need to include straight away in your head tag, in your script tag, sorry, on your JavaScript script tag. But if you wanted to do it, what you would need to do is quite simply, after your file path, you just simply write the word defer, and what that will then do is it will launch that defer tag, attribute, which will subsequently then prevent your website from trying to load the JavaScript before it needs to, or execute the JavaScript before it needs to. Okay. So that is a little bit of kind of, something to consider if you find that you are having some problems with your JavaScript. Try popping the defer attribute into your script tag, and that might solve the problems. If you do have any questions, I know that was a little bit advanced, so if you do have any questions about that, just let us know in the Discord, and we can do our best to help you out with that. Okay. So, just a quick reminder before we get started on our websites again, to always try and comment your code as we're working through it, because if you comment your code, it means that as we're starting to work through it, it'll mean that you can remember, or you can remind yourself what a particular bit of code means before we end up before you forget what it does, type thing. And commenting code is good practice in programming environments, because not only does it help you to remember what a bit of code does, but it can also help somebody who's reading your code. It can help remind them as well what your code is doing. So try to bear in mind that as we're working through our JavaScript, and I'll show you how to comment the code as well, that you try your best to comment it, to keep on top of what each part is doing, because it might help you in future if you wanted to include this piece of JavaScript in your web pages or on other sites that you're working on. So the first bit of JavaScript that we're going to be looking at is from the Mozilla development group, and what we're going to be doing is creating a personalized welcome message to our website, so that when the website officially loads, we'll be able to input a name, and what that will do is it will allow us to have a personalized header on our websites that will essentially have our name or somebody's name in it, so that you can kind of see who the user of the website is at that time. Now, for those of you who are already sort of a bit more comfortable with JavaScript and don't necessarily kind of want to follow along, what we can do is I will post the links in the chat in a second to the websites that I've had these JavaScript this JavaScript code from, so you can follow along if you want to in your own at your own pace. So this is the first website, and the Mozilla Development Group, they are very, very, very good for introducing you to a wide range of topics, including JavaScript and things like that. They are really good. So if any of you wanted to have a read around the subject, I would recommend taking a look at their website, because they are very good for giving different hints and things like that on how to do things, and they can help kind of teach you different concepts. So that's going to be the first thing that we do. So I'm just going to quickly switch the screen over. So hopefully you should all be able to see CodePen now on the screens. So we're kind of back here again, back on CodePen. Of course, I am zoomed in quite a lot to ensure that everybody can read the code. But I'll just load up the example page. Now remember, this was just a very basic kind of work in progress. It's not anything too special, as I'm sure a lot of you can see. It's a bit messy, but the idea is that it contains everything that we need to kind of include on our websites. But of course, on your websites you would have things spaced out a little bit differently. So if I hit the welcome button, you can see that I am prompted with an alert box that is essentially asking me to enter my name. Now, of course, Dan is already in there, so if I just change it to Daniel and I hit OK, you'll see now that my header has changed to being Technicampus School, Daniel. Okay, and if I was to run that again and I was to change it back to being Dan, you can see that the heading is now changed again to being Technicampus School, Dan. Okay, so this is what we're going to be programming to start off with today. This is the first thing that we're going to be doing, and essentially this is the code that we're going to be using. So I'll be talking through this step by step on my other website, which again, as we know, isn't perfect by any means, but it is what we're going to be using as a basis for this session. So what I'm going to be doing is changing the heading of the website to being to displaying my name after it when the page loads up. Okay, so once the page loads up, my heading is going to change to saying Carnarvon Castle, Dan. Or actually, we'll change the subheading. That would be better, wouldn't it? We'll say welcome, followed by the user, the name of the user who's using the website at that time. So that's the first thing that we're going to go through today. Now, there are lots of different things that we're going to be covering, so I will be taking my time kind of working through them. But remember to comment your code, and to comment your code you can use 2 slashes, okay? And then everything after that then will be considered a comment. Oops. Will be considered a comment. So it won't actually be kind of, this will not be necessarily part of the code that runs. This is just simply saying that, explaining what a particular part of the code does. Now remember, what we did last week was we set up a basic bit of JavaScript, just 2 lines, that says that when we click on a link, the website informs us that we are being redirected to another page. Okay, so if you wanted to comment some code out, which is a common thing that a lot of people do if they decide that they temporarily don't want to execute a bit of code or something like that, you can actually comment code out like this. And essentially what we are doing here is we are saying that all of this code is now commented out, which means that it won't actually be executed when the code is run. So if I click on a link now, you can see that it doesn't actually do anything. Okay, well, that one does, because that's actually got a link to it. But you can see that when we click on a link, okay, so it's uncommented now, but as you saw earlier, when it was commented, it wasn't actually doing anything. It wasn't prompting me that I was being redirected to another site because I'd commented the code out. So we're going to be doing some basic JavaScript now. So to start off with, first thing that we need to do is we actually need to create a button, okay? So that every time we click that button, we are prompted with that alert box that says, you know, please enter your name. So we're going to create a button. I'm going to place it somewhere. Let's just place it underneath the welcome heading, okay? And to create a button, you simply just say button, okay? You can give the button a class if you want to, but you don't have to. So I'm going to say my button is called welcome, and then I'm going to close the button tag here. So you can see now that I've now produced a button, and when I click on that button it doesn't actually do anything. Now feel free, of course, in your CSS files, feel free to sort of restyle the button and move it around the screen a little bit, okay? I'm just going to leave it there for now, but feel free to kind of manipulate where things are using CSS. So back to the JavaScript. The first thing that we need to be able to do is we need to actually assign our button to a particular variable, okay? So I'm going to declare a variable to start off with, and there are two keywords you can use to do that. There's let and var. I'm going to be using let, so I'm going to say let, and then I'm going to just say, for example, my button. Okay, so my button is the name of the variable. Okay, and then I'm going to be using a line of code which we have seen last week up here. Okay, this documents.query selector line. Now, of course, remember, this is just one way of being able to. This is a way of grabbing a specific element from your home pages. Okay. You could actually fetch something using an ID, or you could fetch something using a class. Okay, so like we've got classes in places here. Okay, we've got H2 there as well. So remember, you can use the document.query selector method as a way of grabbing a specific element, but you can also set IDs on things and things like that. So I'm actually going to give my first heading, going to change its class to being an ID, just for the purposes of this, and I'm going to set it to having an ID of, well, we can just leave it as title for now, that'll be fine. So I'm going to say let my button is equal to document dot query selector. Remember to use camel case when writing these out. And I'm going to then say that I'm fetching my button. Okay. So that is now saying that we have assigned that button that we've produced here to the my button variable. Okay. And I'm also going to produce another variable called my heading, and I'm going to say document.get it's document.get element by ID, because I gave that heading an ID, and then the ID, of course, is in this case title. Okay, so now these two variables that we have at the start here have been assigned different things. So in the first instance, we've assigned the button we've assigned the my button variable with the button that we've created in the HTML, and then the my heading variable has been attached to the title element over on the HTML, so just here. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to do. Now, in JavaScript, a lot of the things that we have a lot of the things that run in JavaScript are considered to be kind of like functions. Okay, so we're going to be making a new function today, which is declared using the keyword function. And then what you call your function is then up to you, but it's probably recommended that you use a name which kind of makes sense, so that you can remember what that function is actually doing. Okay, so let's just say, for example, I'll call mine set username. Okay, written again in camel case. I'm saying open bracket, close bracket, and then I'm opening the curly brackets. Now what you can see here is that I have now created or declared a new function, okay, which is going to be what my program is going to run when I call that specific function. So all of the code that's related to this specific function will be inside of this. So within this function, I need to create a new variable that's now going to hold, okay, the name that I'm entering. So I'm going to create a new variable. So again, the keyword let, I'm going to call it name, so that we can remember that it's related to the name of the person, so we know what that variable is actually holding. And then we're going to use the keyword prompt, which is what that box was that appeared on my other website. Okay, and we're going to say, please enter your name. So what this line of code here is essentially doing is it's saying that when this function is run, a variable called name is going to be declared, and it's going to be it will issue a prompt to the user, which will say please enter your name. And when you enter a name and hit OK on that prompt box that appears, it will then store whatever you type in that box into the variable name for us to use later on in the program. Now, one thing that we need to bear in mind here is that if we are using this particular function and our variable or our heading, so to speak, has already got a name stored within it, then we want to kind of try and prevent our website from trying to update that name before we ask it to. Okay, so to do that, we can use something known as an if statement. Now, a lot of us have come across if statements in the past, and they are used to decide if one piece of code should run or if another piece of code should run, depending on whether or not a condition is true. Okay, so if a condition is true, then the if statement will run, else a different bit of code could run. Okay, and then of course there are more complex if statements as well, which are known as else ifs, which essentially say that there can be multiple layers to your if statement essentially. So you can have several different outcomes which your program will check, and if one of the conditions from your program is true, then what it will do is it will tell you and it will execute that specific bit of code. Okay, so what we need to be saying is that if, okay, our variable is empty, okay, so essentially if our variable doesn't already contain a name, so this is what this exclamation mark means. It means not, okay. So what this is essentially saying is that if there is not, that's the wrong name of the variable, sorry, that's better. So we're saying if this variable, this name variable, doesn't contain a name, okay, at the time, then we can run our set username function. Okay, so we're essentially saying what this bit of code here is saying is that when this function loads, we are prompting the user to give their name, and if there isn't already a name stored in that variable, then we are going to run this function, which is the one that we've just created up here. So it'll prompt the user to enter their name. Okay. However, what we need to be able to do is tell our website what to print, what to do with the information that's stored within the variable. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete the contents of this h2, so that we can actually have the contents printed through our JavaScript function. So far, we have said that we are declaring a variable, and if the variable doesn't contain a name already, then we want to run that function. But otherwise, then we want to obviously be able to assign our name to the program. So we can use an else statement, and we're essentially saying that when we if the variable doesn't already contain a value, we can have the website assign the name that we have entered to the name variable so that it can be printed to the website. So we can say something known as local storage .set item. Now this is a way in which we are able to kind of store the value of something kind of locally, okay, temporarily, and we would essentially then say something like name, comma, and then the name of our variable. So in this case, of course, I've called my variable name. So what's essentially happening here is we are saying that we're replacing this value, name, with whatever name is entered into the program. Okay? So that's the first thing that we have to do. Hopefully everybody's with me so far with that one. And then what we have to do is we have to then assign what we have just allocated to name to that website, to that program. Okay, so what we can do is we can say in this case we have got my heading, but it could be whatever you've called your variable. In this case, I've called it my heading. So what we are doing is we are saying my heading dot inner HTML. So this is essentially doing what we would do on a HTML document. Is we would actually assign in here. We would normally just print out, we would just type something in there, wouldn't we? So like I had earlier, I had welcome typed in there. You can type in word welcome in there, and then it would appear on the screen here. But what we're doing, using the JavaScript now, is we are actually saying what is going to go in here. So we are saying my heading, which is the name of the variable, dot inner HTML can be equal to something like, you could say welcome, and then you could say comma, space, so make sure that you leave a space because this is where your variable value is going to go, and then we can essentially concatenate, is what it's called, this sentence together using the plus symbol followed by the name of your variable. So you would say what we're essentially saying with these two lines of storage, these two lines of code here, is that we are temporarily storing the value of the variable in here, and then we are saying after that we are changing the value of our heading, because of course we've already, my heading has been assigned to the variable has been assigned to the h2 that we declared on the HTML document. We are basically changing what was assigned to being the name of the variable with welcome written in front of it. Okay, so I'll leave that on the screen for just a second, just so that people can have an opportunity to try and kind of get caught up. Remember, if there are any questions, just post them in the chat. So with that local storage, we essentially, there is a lot of information about that on the Mozilla link that I've posted in the chat, but what the Mozilla link says essentially is the local storage bit. It basically means that we are storing data in the browser and then we are retrieving it later. Okay? And then we are creating and storing an item here, called name, which we are assigning the value of the variable that we've created up here. Okay, so that's one way of kind of going about things. Okay, lovely. So once we finish that, that is the end of that else statement. So in just a second, we will move on to doing the next bit. So what we'll do now is we'll just alter, once again we're going to add just 2 lines of code which will alter our heading for us so that it actually has our name and things after it. So outside of this if statement, so make sure that we are outside of the if statement. Okay, so we're going to go down to here. We're going to include a line of code which is going to essentially now set the content of our heading, okay, of our h2 to being what we have written just here. So we can say my heading dot text content is equal to, and then we would just simply say welcome, comma, space, and then remember the name of the variable to go after it, like that. Okay. So we also need to produce another if statement which is essentially going to tell us what we need the program to do in the eventuality that there isn't something stored in the local storage. So currently what we have got is it's just checking if the variable name contains a value. Well, it could well be that the variable name contains a value, but there may be a point where there may be a point where we need to actually check if the local storage has something stored within it as well. So to do that, we can just simply write another if statement, which is going to do something very similar to what we were doing in that previous if statement. Okay. So we start a new if statement off, and you should try and indent this so that it is still a little bit away from the side of the screen. And we're essentially going to say if not local storage dot get item name. Just notice a typo up there as well, which I will fix. There we go. Okay. So we're essentially saying here if the local storage does not have the value associated with that name that we produced earlier, then we need to once again run the set username function to make sure that we can actually assign a value to it. But we also need to say what happens if there is a value that's a part of that local storage. So that's where the else comes in. So we'll need to create a new variable to do this. So we can say let, we can call it something like stored name, okay, and then that can be equal once again to our local storage, which is what we produced in that previous if statement, dot get item name, which was something that we of course made up here earlier. Okay. And then what we would simply do then is we would then set the content of my heading to being welcome and then name. Oops, that's the wrong one. Apologies, it's stored name this time. There we go, because we are actually outside of this original function now. So therefore that first variable, we've obviously produced a new one for this particular section. Okay. Now, we also need to tell the website what to do when we click on a particular button. Okay. Now we've obviously produced the button here. Okay. We've produced the button here, and we need to say, I'm not quite sure why it's already put my name there. I think it might be taking it from the other website, from the local storage, but hopefully this should change on here in a second. But we need to be able to tell this button to actually do something when it is clicked, okay? Because currently I'm clicking on it and nothing is happening. Now up here we created a my button variable, okay, to essentially take the button that's on the home screen. And this is all good and well if you only have the one button, but of course if you had several buttons you might want to consider using the documents.getElementById command and assigning individual buttons individual IDs, or if you wanted to do it sort of that way, that's one suggestion. But we need to be able to tell our button to do something when it is pressed or when it is clicked. So we can use that my button variable that we created earlier, and we can use the keyword onClick, and that's essentially telling our program to run that function that we talked about earlier, okay, set username that we created earlier, and I'm hoping that this works. So we told our program earlier that now when our button is clicked, it should run this set username function. So if I click it now, you can see it's asking me to enter my name. If I say test, you can see that it has now changed the name of my heading to welcome test. Okay. If I run it again and change it to Dan, you can see that it's changing it's taking that value from the local storage and it's assigning it to my name, to my heading. So that was very long. I know that was very long, and there's quite a few lines of code here, so I'll summarize all of that now for you, just so that we're all kind of on the same page with it. So we're declaring two variables at the top of the screen here, which are linked to my HTML. This first variable is linked to my query, to my button, okay, and the second variable is linked to my title, okay, which is what this h2 is here. We're then creating a new function called setUserName, which, when it's run, will prompt the user to enter a name in that prompt box that appeared at the top of the screen. The function will check if the variable name already contains a value. If it doesn't, hence the not here, this exclamation mark means not. Okay, so if not name, then it will simply set the username, it will run the setUserName function so that it can take a value. Otherwise, it will take the value from local storage and it will will basically create an item in local storage that will be called name, which will take the value of whatever's put into this variable, and then we will then be creating changing the value, or the inner HTML, of the heading variable, my heading variable here, to being welcome, comma, and the name that was entered. Okay, so that's what's happening there. Then down here we are checking if the local storage already contains a variable or not. If it does, then it will run, it will store the name that was entered into this stored name variable and apply it to the heading. Otherwise, what it's going to do is it's just going to prompt the user for a name. And then down here we are saying myButton.onClick, which means that when we click on this button, it's going to bring up the prompt box, and it's also going to make sure as well that we can't actually cancel it until we actually enter a name, which will prevent us from having unnecessary null values. So if I just enter test, okay, so it has the tendency to do that sometimes, but there you go, test has now been popped in there like that. Okay. Now, if you did want to have a bit of a read around this and get maybe a little bit more detail about it, because I know I've gone through that quite quickly to try and keep time and things like that, but that link that I have put in the Discord will hopefully help you to understand that a little bit further. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask about that so far? Okay. That's fine. So I'll just give everybody a few minutes now before we move on to the next part of our the JavaScript. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the JavaScript up on the screen. I will zoom out just a tad, just so that you can see it all. Okay, I'm going to leave this up on the screen for everybody to see. And then in a little while, what we'll do is we'll move on to actually talking about how we can do that fun little typewriter style text when a button is clicked. Okay, so I'll give everybody a little while to just have a play with it, get things running with that first set of JavaScript. Remember, indentation is important as well, okay? Just so that you can help sort of keep track of what's part of what function and what's part of what if statements, etc., and what's separate to the functions and things like that. And then in a little while then we will then carry on with adding some more JavaScript to our programs. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just carry on adding a little bit more JavaScript to our websites. Okay, so it's this one is only a couple of lines of code, so it's nothing too it's not as big as the last one. Okay, and essentially, if I just go back to that typewriter text that I was showing the other day. So on this website that I've got here, my testing website, you can see that if I hit the typewriter button, it kind of types things out in a weird way. Now this doesn't really have much, functionality to it as such. It's not exactly something that's you know, particularly useful, but it's just a little bit of fun. In a way, for us to, you know, include just a little bit of something that we can include on the website, if we want to. Okay, and it's done using, if I can find the code, it's done using this code down here. Okay, so going back to that other website, here we are. We're going to add in just a little tiny bit of JavaScript to the end here, just to kind of keep going with just add a little bit more JavaScript essentially. So I'm going to add a new button. So I'm going to put it underneath, technically next to the other button. So I'm going to say, what will we call? We'll call this one type writer. Okay. Oops. Do that all the time. I put a question mark instead of an angled bracket. And you can see now that I've got my new typewriter button, and of course it doesn't do anything. Okay, it's completely useless currently. Okay. What we need to do is we need to state what this button is going to write out and what this button is actually going to do. So back over on the JavaScript section, okay, there's a series of different variables that we need to create in order to make this work, and I'll just quickly post that link for you as well to this section in the Discord, just in case some of you want to take a look at it. Okay. So what we need to do essentially is we need to write out pretty much exactly what is going to be included in that when we hit the typewriter button. So I'm going to declare a few variables. This time I'm going to use the keyword var instead of let. Okay, if you want to use, you could try using let as well. I'm not sure if it would work, but I'm sure it might do. So you could try using var this time. I'm going to set I as the name of my variable, and I'm going to give it a value of 0, and we'll see why that is in a little while. Okay, and I'm also going to declare a variable called var text. Now the reason I'm creating the one called var text is because this is what's going to hold what's typed out when I hit that typewriter button. Okay, so I'm going to say something like welcome to this website about Carnarvon Castle. Okay. I'm also going to set up a new variable which I'm going to call speed. Now the speed variable is essentially going to control how quickly our typewriter types things out. So I'm going to set mine to being 50 because that's a relatively good speed. And then of course I need to link my second variable, my second button that I've just produced in my HTML to a variable. So I'm going to say something like var my second button, and we're going to use that document. I'm not sure, did I set an ID for that button? I don't think I did I? No. So we'll set this button an ID. We'll just call it button 2 for an example. Okay. So document.get element by ID. Okay. And then we'll say second button. I believe that's what I called it, wasn't it? Second button. Oh no, sorry, button 2. Apologies. Button 2. There we go. Okay. And now this variable, my second button, will be linked to button 2 on the HTML page. Okay. So once again, we need to create a new function. I'm going to call it typewriter because this is what the function is essentially going to do. Okay, it's going to look like I'm typing out some text on a typewriter. And what we need to ensure is that if there is no text already printed, that the variable runs in order to print that text to the screen. So if I said something like, once again we're going to use an if statement for this, if I is less than something called text.length, okay? So essentially this I is going to be checking, this if statement is going to be checking that if the length of text, okay, if the value of I, is less than the length of this variable, then it's going to run then our function can essentially run, okay? And we're saying if it's less than the length of the text, then what we need to do is we need to include what's been written in my text variable here into a paragraph over on my HTML page. Okay. Now currently I haven't actually got a space for that, so let's just put a new blank paragraph in somewhere. So we can give a blank paragraph, which we will give an ID. So let's give a paragraph, where should we put it? Let's put it above, where should we put this paragraph? We'll try and put it towards the top of the screen so that we can actually see it. So let's put it underneath. Let's put it just before the image. Again, I know my HTML is looking a little bit messy now, but we'll give this an ID of typewriter. But I'm sure your HTMLs will look a lot nicer than mine. So we've given that an ID now, which means that we are able to now link our typewriter paragraph to the text variable that we've produced just up here. So we can say document.get element by ID. The name of our variable was did I write it in camel case, or did I just write it in, yes I did write it in camel case, that's fine. So we would say here, we would say typewriter, so now we have linked up that variable. And we want to be setting, like with the above function that we made a second ago, it's inner HTML, and we can use that plus equals symbol to do this next bit. So this means that we are essentially adding something to this particular, well, in this case ID, but we are adding this line of code, which is text dot char at I. Okay. And we are then using this I++ function to basically make sure that it doesn't essentially, so that we can still run this if statement essentially. And we also want to be able to set, obviously, the speed in which the program types out its text. So we can set a timeout to typewriter speed. Okay. So it's going to now make sure that this function only runs at the set speed, which is what we declared up here with our variable. Now, like with the other function, we need our button to know that when it is clicked, it needs to write out some text. So we can say button.onClick is equal to function, and then the name of our function, which of course in this case is typewriter. And in theory now, when we hit this button, hopefully it'll work, you can see that what's happening is I have to repeatedly click the button. However, as I click the button, it is populating that JavaScript with that paragraph with the contents of my variable. Now I just need to try and figure out why it is not writing out the length in full. So there has to be a reason buried in here somewhere. So what it should be doing is it should be writing it all out in one go. Here we are. Typo there. So let's save that and refresh. There we are. So you can see now that as I am writing out, after I've hit that button, it writes out that text in and adds it into the paragraph. Okay. So remember, I'll leave that on the screen for people to take a look at. Okay, so remember we've got all those variables at the top, followed then by the main body of the function, and then we are calling the function down here for when the button is clicked. It will then execute the bit of code to type out that paragraph, or sentence in this case. Okay. So that is all of the JavaScript that we were going to include today. I would encourage you, if you have time, of course, as I say every week, prioritize schoolwork first. But if you have some free time and you're interested in web design and that sort of thing, then of course feel free to have a read around the subject. The Mozilla developer website is very, very good for giving you lots of information about developing different things. The typewriter text, the people who developed the typewriter text code, which I just put on the screen, that we just made, that was W3 Schools, so they are very, very good for producing different sort of little tutorials that you can do to help kind of, run your run some JavaScript or even HTML and CSS tutorials as well for you to include on your website. Remember, if you have been working on your project files, okay, so for those of you who have created project files and who wanted to update those project files to essentially contain what we've worked on today, or if you wanted to have a look at your own kind of bits of JavaScript sort of in your own time that you wanted to add and you wanted to research, then feel free to do that. And remember, we are also available on the Discord as well at the moment if you wanted to ask us anything, and we'll kind of do our best to kind of try and help you. We are going to end today's session slightly earlier. We'll end the session at 5:30 as opposed to 6 o'clock tonight. What I will spend the last 5 minutes doing is, if anybody else is watching and they wanted to post us some questions in Discord, then feel free to do that during these last sort of 5 minutes now. But whilst we're kind of wrapping up today's session a little bit sooner, I'll just kind of remind you all again of the new upcoming coding clubs that we have coming up from the start of November. So remember, this style of coding club with me on a Wednesday afternoon and Jack on a Thursday afternoon are going to be continuing until the end of October. Okay, so there's not going to be any changes just yet. At the start of November, we will be transitioning into our new style of coding club. Okay, so there will be a choice of 3 different coding clubs for you to choose from. The sessions that I will be running will be a little bit more more kind of introduction to different programming on things like Scratch. So my sessions will be sort of more focused on Scratch. Obviously, other delivery officers will be doing different things. So Jack will be doing a different topic, and Cardiff University will also be doing a different topic as well. But my sessions will initially at least be based around using Scratch. And essentially, what you'll be doing during those sessions is working in whichever coding club you decide to go with. You'll be running, building on a project like you've been doing with me, with Gamefruit, Minecraft, and now sort of web design. You'll be building, or will be working on a project, okay? And then they will be running over 6 to sort of 7 week periods, so you will have an opportunity to really kind of get to work on a particular website, on a particular project even. And then they will be running Mondays, Wednesdays, or Fridays, depending on which club you decide to join, and they will be run between 4:30 and 6:30. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we will be doing our Techno Live sessions, which will be one-off sessions every week, so a different topic sort of every week. So there won't be necessarily a project that you will be working on with those. You will just kind of be building on, you'll be just sort of working on different things every week. They will be also running weekly as well, so you will have the Techno Clubs as well as the Techno Live sessions, and they're going to be running every week from the start of November, with me and Jack, and you will have an opportunity to join those as well if you want to. And the Techno Live sessions will only be an hour long, so they will only run from 4:30 until 5:30, so they'll be slightly shorter than the Techno Club sessions. But the Techno Club sessions will really give you a chance to work on something and build on something sort of in your own time as well, if you wanted to. So that, of course, will be happening from the start of November, and we will release, sign-up forms and things like that for you, or for your parents as well, depending on your age. We'll specify the age range for how old you have to be to fill the form in yourself and things like that. We'll specify all of that when the forms and things are released. But you will be, we will, give you the information as soon as we get it finalised. Okay, so lots of exciting changes coming up. So again, thank you for all of you who could join today. Thank you for joining, or for those of you who are catching up afterwards. Thank you for watching. Remember, if any of you do have any particular questions that they wanted to ask, that you want to ask during the week, then feel free to do that. And remember, we will be back next Wednesday again, to kind of wrap things up really with JavaScript and things like that. And then for the last session from this style of coding clubs, which is at the end of the month, so in 2 weeks' time, we'll be doing something quite exciting, which I won't reveal just yet, but I know that all of you will enjoy, so hopefully you'll all be able to make it to that session. But I know that you'll all enjoy it. So again, thank you very much everybody for joining. Andy, I will stop the stream now, and then I will just catch you quickly in Techno Team before we wrap up.